45% of all dementia cases worldwide could be prevented or delayed, and that single number reshaped how the medical world thinks about memory loss after 60. It comes from the 2024 Lancet Commission, the largest review of dementia risk factors ever published, led by Professor Jill Livingston and her team at University College London using decades of global evidence. Nearly half of these cases aren't locked in by genetics or age. They're connected to things people can actually change. And today, we're covering the 3 interventions with the strongest clinical evidence behind them. The third one just produced results that no trial in history had been able to achieve, and we'll get to exactly what happened. Right now, 7.2 million Americans over 65 are living with Alzheimer's disease, a count that crossed 7 million for the first time in 2025. Most of them showed early signs that went unrecognized or got brushed off as normal aging, and that's where the real cost sits, because the warning signs themselves aren't what most people expect. Some degree of cognitive change after 60 is completely normal, and that's the part worth hearing first. Processing speed dips a little each year, starting as early as your 40s. Working memory slows down gradually, and picking up new information takes a bit longer than it used to. What holds steady, though, tells a very different story. Vocabulary, general knowledge, procedural memory like riding a bike or playing piano, simple attention, and word comprehension all remain largely intact, and some of those abilities actually improve well into your 70s and 80s. Around 40% of adults over 65 experience some form of age-related memory change, and most of it falls squarely in the normal range. Misplacing your keys and then retracing your steps to find them counts as normal, and so does blanking on someone's name before it comes back to you a few minutes later. The line between normal and not normal is more specific than most people realize, and the Alzheimer's Association has mapped it across 10 warning signs. Forgetting recently learned information sits at the top of that list, not a name from 20 years ago, but something you heard yesterday, paired with asking the same questions over and over. New difficulty with planning or problem solving looks like struggling to follow a recipe you've made 100 times, or losing track of monthly bills in a way that never used to happen. Confusion about time or place goes beyond forgetting what day it is for a moment and extends to losing track of the season entirely, or not understanding where you are or how you arrived there. Putting the remote control in the refrigerator and being unable to retrace your steps to find it is one example. Decreased judgment is another, and it's one that doesn't come up nearly enough. Giving large sums to telemarketers, making unusual financial decisions, or paying less attention to grooming all fit that pattern. Withdrawal also belongs on this list, pulling back from hobbies, social activities, or projects you once looked forward to. Dr. Nancy Cicotte of Cedars-Sinai described it this way: the tell is often when a patient gets brought in by their spouse, and when the spouse says they have memory problems, the patient responds with, "What are you talking about?" That gap between what the family observes and what the person recognizes in themselves can itself be a warning sign. None of this locks in a diagnosis, and that matters more than most people realize. A middle stage called Mild Cognitive Impairment, or MCI, affects roughly 12 to 22% of people over 65. What makes MCI different from what most people fear is that it doesn't always move in one direction. Nearly 38% of people with MCI in the Mayo Clinic study of aging actually reverted to normal cognition. Early detection isn't about accepting a fate, it's about gaining time, and that time only counts if you know what to do with it. Which brings us to the part of this video that can actually change outcomes. These brain changes begin a decade or more before symptoms show up, according to the National Institute on Aging, which means by the time someone notices consistent problems, the process has already been running for years. The hippocampus, the part of the brain most responsible for forming new memories, shrinks with age, and overall brain volume drops about 5% per decade after 40, before accelerating sharply after 70. What scientists learned over the last 20 years, though, changed the entire picture. The brain keeps far more ability to adapt and rebuild than anyone previously believed, and 3 specific interventions now have the clinical data to back that up. The first one carries the World Health Organization's strongest recommendation: A meta-analysis covering 58 studies and nearly 258,000 participants tied physical activity to a 20% reduced risk of all-cause dementia. Data from the Framingham Heart Study pushed that number even higher. Midlife exercise lowered dementia risk by 41%, while late-life exercise lowered it by 45%. The single most striking result came from a 2011 study by Kirk Erickson and colleagues, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. 120 older adults were split into two groups, half doing a year-long aerobic exercise program and half doing only stretching. The exercise group's hippocampus, the memory center we just talked about, actually grew by 2%, effectively reversing 1 to 2 years of age-related shrinkage, while the stretching group continued to lose volume. That 2% gain came from walking, not marathons. Current WHO guidelines call for adults 65 and older to get 150 to 300 minutes per week of moderate-intensity aerobic activity, plus muscle strengthening work at least 2 days per week, which works out to about 30 minutes of brisk walking 5 days a week. That covers movement. The second intervention involves what goes on the plate, and the numbers are just as hard to dismiss. Two specific dietary patterns carry the strongest evidence for brain health: the Mediterranean diet and the Mind diet. 23 studies reviewed in a Giroscience meta-analysis published in 2025 tied Mediterranean diet adherence to a 30% reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease. A separate Harvard study that same year uncovered something unexpected about genetics in food. People who carry the APOE4 gene, the strongest known genetic risk factor for Alzheimer's, turned out to benefit the most from a Mediterranean eating pattern, showing a 35% reduced dementia risk. The people with the highest genetic vulnerability got the most protection from what they ate. The Mind diet grew out of work by the late Martha Claire Morris at Rush University, who designed it as a hybrid of the Mediterranean and DASH diets aimed specifically at the brain. Strict adherence in her landmark study cut Alzheimer's risk by 53%, and even moderate adherence, not perfection, brought a 35% reduction. People in the top third of Mind diet followers performed cognitively as if they were 7.5 years younger than those in the bottom third. In practice, the diet emphasizes green leafy vegetables, berries, nuts, whole grains, fish, poultry, olive oil, and beans, while limiting red meat, butter, cheese, pastries, and fried food. Now, here's the third intervention, the one we mentioned at the top, and this is the one that just changed what researchers thought was possible. The ACTIVE trial enrolled 2,800 adults aged 65 and older starting in 1998 and tracked them for 20 years, making it the largest U.S. randomized controlled trial of cognitive training ever run. February 2026 brought the final results, and they delivered something no previous trial had managed to achieve. Speed of processing training, a computerized program that flashes objects on screen at increasingly brief durations and challenges users to identify and locate them, paired with periodic booster sessions, produced a 25% reduction in dementia diagnoses over those 20 years. That makes it the first randomized controlled trial in history to show that a single intervention could reduce long-term dementia incidence by a measurable margin. The total training time behind that result adds up to roughly 22.5 hours spread over 3 years, counting both the initial sessions and the boosters. 22 hours for a quarter less dementia risk over 2 decades. NIH Director Jay Bhattacharya framed it plainly. This study shows that simple brain training, done for just weeks, may help people stay mentally healthy for years longer. Marilyn Albert of Johns Hopkins served as the corresponding author on the study. One distinction matters here, and it's one that most people miss. Not every brain training app produces these results. The FTC fined Lumosity $2 million in 2016 for deceptive claims about their games preventing dementia, and the scientific consensus holds that most commercial brain games only improve performance on the trained tasks without transferring to real-world cognition. The ACTIVE trial used a specific speed of processing protocol now available through BrainHQ, and that protocol alone carries 20 years of trial evidence behind it. Each of those 3 interventions works on its own. Combined, they work better. The Finnish finger trial, led by Dr. Mia Kipelto at the Karolinska Institute, bundled exercise, diet, and cognitive training together with vascular risk management and measured 25% greater overall cognitive improvement, 83% greater executive function improvement, and a 30% lower risk of cognitive impairment over just 2 years. Dr. Capelto described the shift in thinking this way. At that time, the focus was only on high age and genetic factors. Now we know that 45% of these risk factors are there throughout the whole life course, and that's why we say that it's never too early to prevent dementia. That 45% from the top of this video isn't just a number, it's a window, and it stays open longer than most people assume. Memory loss at the level of dementia is not an inevitable part of aging, and the science on that has gotten clearer with each passing year. The window only matters, though, if the early signs get recognized and acted on, rather than waved away as just getting older. If any of this hit home, talk to your doctor, and if it helped, send it to someone you care about, because starting that conversation might